All right, welcome back to the VidMark podcast. Happy New Year. I'm excited to launch a new episode talking about objectives and goals. So everyone has probably heard about SMART goals, but today we're going to be talking about OKRs. So the O stands for objectives and the KR stands for key results. So we're going to be taking notes from the book Measure What Matters by John Doerr. And I want to say a big thank you to Portland AMA chapter for giving me this book in a raffle. It's not as much of a marketing book, but more kind of about business, personal development, goal setting, and structuring. And I think of this book kind of like Good to Great by Jim Collins, many of you might have heard of, but this gives you more of a tangible roadmap that you're able to direct back to some metrics. And actually this book John Doerr was very influential for Google in the very beginning stages for founders Sergey and Larry. But without further ado, let's cue the intro. Welcome to VidMark, a podcast to give you the video marketing knowledge to always hit the mark. Let us help build your confidence with video strategy and content creation best practices. Join us weekly for pro tips and guest interviews as we explore the powerful communication tool of video. It's time to boost your business. Let's talk video. So this book starts with John Doerr, talks about his backstory, how he worked at IBM, worked at Intel, and explains how this is something that those companies use to be able to streamline success and be able to just take things to the next level. And just a little side note, I always find it kind of fascinating and interesting when someone's name actually reflects what they do. So his name is John Doerr, and he helps people do things. I don't know. Thought that was kind of funny. But he talks at the very beginning of this book, he explains Sergey Brin, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, and Larry Page, the Stanford dropouts that started Google from their dorm room, which kind of seems to be the common trend. I'm watching Silicon Valley, and it seems to be you drop out of college, you start a business, and you just take things to the next level. But he explains how in the early stages, Google lacked corporate structure and expertise. So he was able to come in there, and he actually says that he's not the originator of OKRs. He attributes it to Andy Grove, who graduated from Harvard in 1975. And he started working at Intel and implemented this as a successful management practice. Andy Grove is quoted as saying, "Bad companies are destroyed by crisis, good companies survive crisis, but great companies improve during crisis," which I think is very telling and very relevant to what we're going through right now with the pandemic. And so the companies that probably have OKRs in place that were able to shift and transition during this are able to actually improve and thrive. So he uses Intel as a model, and just diving into the O, that stands for objectives. This is your vision or inspirational or aspirational thing that you want to achieve. And you want to make sure that your objective is very crisp and concise. And then the second part is the KRs, which is key results, which are the milestones or the things, the metrics, the tangible things that you have to do to be able to hit that objective. So then the book goes into maybe some of the downside of goals, which is Goals Gone Wild, which is a Harvard publication. It talks about the dark side of setting goals, the Enron fiasco where they were trying to meet too big of margins, or even Mount Everest hikers that get stranded. And which can lead to kind of narrow-mindedness, irrational behavior. But when you're smart about it and you're concentrated and you use these implemented OKRs, you shouldn't run into some of those similar challenges that people come into when they set goals. So in management, it's hard to produce better results because a lot of people want to just go for the easy goals, the short-term things, rather than thinking kind of big picture, because how the economy is set up is that we're looking for these quarterly targets. But they explain that what you should be doing with your goals is making sure that they're public, making sure that everyone knows about them, and that way you're able to get clear buy-in, and then you're able to get everyone on the ship going in the same direction. And I'll get into it a little bit later, but actually, as for some of these companies, putting the goals in the bathroom so people know what the goals are. Nowadays, I think you can use some softwares that people can just click into an intranet and see what everyone is working on. But what they wanted to do at Google is be innovators at scale, which is pretty remarkable because innovation usually happens on a small scale, or maybe one individual is innovative, but to be able to scale that, you have to be able to welcome, big data and big ideas. So OKRs, they explain that, just to kind of continue to prove that these are a well-tried method, they were the driving force behind Google Search, Chrome, Android, Maps, YouTube, Google Play, and Gmail. And one of the other pros of OKRs is that they take out some of the politics in an organization. You're able to say, oh, hey, like, that doesn't align with my OKR. I can't do that. Where, sometimes you might have an executive, pull someone aside, have them try to do something that's outside of the OKRs. But if you have something that you can point to, then you're able to cut out all of the noise, cut out all of the excess, and get the results that you're looking for. And I think in the marketing world, this is a really relevant book because sometimes marketing can be seen as like intangible, how do you measure awareness and things like that. But you can, at the end of the day, break those down, and we'll talk about it later, but you can even, put metrics to intangible things to show the measurement. What's nice about OKRs is they act as a carrot, and employees can see the team progress, and it's public accountability. We've talked about on this podcast in the past, when you explain your goals to other people, when you share them with others, you're more likely to achieve them. And they create focus, and they create commitment to product, they create commitment to teamwork, and they stretch people to go beyond what they thought of initially was possible. I feel like I'm kind of explaining the benefits of them over and over again, but that's kind of what the book was. It explained in the beginning what they were, and then gave success story after success story of why it was important. And what makes OKRs different is that they're not just your typical business strategy where you set it and forget it, and you just go look at it the next year and you hope that you kind of met your goals. Maybe you didn't. And instead of a hierarchy within an organization, it actually creates a community and builds trust within an organization. And what's really nice, I haven't implemented this within an organization before, but I can only imagine that it's nice to know that like what you're working on is going to be directly affecting another department, another team, or actually is aligning with the overall vision of your organization. I know for a lot of millennials, wanting to make an impact is a big thing that people strive for, or gives them meaning for their job. And so if you have an OKR, you know that you're directly making an impact, which is empowering. And what's nice is when you have these in place, you are able to say, hey, you're not meeting your goal, rather than attacking the person. So it kind of takes the emotional element out of it. What I thought was really cool at Intel, you can see the CEO's OKRs, which really creates a sense of honesty, and it's more of a binary approach to your work that you're able to say, did you reach it or did you not? And we'll get into it a little later, but there's actually a scoring and a rating system that Google implemented to, show whether or not you're hitting those goals. I guess a little personal note, how does the OKRs relate to me and my business? For me, it's to become, a leading about video company in Portland. And how do I do that? Well, I have to have higher quality videos in my portfolio, creating some of the brand messaging, having direct metrics about how many people I need to reach out to, creating X amount of testimonials. And then, some of my day-to-day metrics, making X amount of phone calls. I don't want to reveal too much because I'm sure some of my competitors are listening to this podcast, but making sure that I'm closing at a certain amount of rate, making sure I'm taking X amount of courses to continue my education. All of these are factors in trying to be successful. I thought a cool quote from the book, which is, Peter Drucker, who's one of the gurus of business, explains that what gets measured gets managed. And that's often the case. If you don't measure it, you don't really know where you're at, and you don't know how to move forward. So let's break down the OKRs. So what they explain for the objective, you need to they use the word crush the purpose or task, make it overly clear of what you want to accomplish, and then setting your goals in the next 6 to 12 months. And making sure that you're setting goals is important, because if you don't, then it leads to non-action, leads to non-decisions, and typically just leads to nothing. A big portion of this book, they talk about creating a culture that is reflective of trying to reach these OKRs, because people feel, when they feel comfortable expressing their challenges, when they feel comfortable explaining where they want to go, cultivating innovation and individual approaches to problems is much more possible. And one of Google's missions is to organize the world's information and make it universal, accessible, and useful. That's a very lofty goal, but they've been able to do that by reflecting that down to tangible metrics. So they were able to get the whole company on page. They were able to have the leadership model across the organization what they want to accomplish. So typically, objectives are kind of these loose, kind of is what we're aiming for. But with the OKRs, they want to make sure that's earthbound. So you want to have a key number of driving measurements, such as revenue or growth, active users, quality, safety, market share. These are the means by how you hit your metrics or how you hit your objectives. And a really cool thing that I learned from this book was that the analysis should happen shortly after you measure things. You actually learn a lot more from the reflection on an experience than the experience that you actually had. So post-mortems are huge, very often overlooked. A lot of people don't like doing them, don't want to do them, but that's where the learning occurs. And they used a cool example in here of the Ford Pinto. If they would have only used OKRs with the Ford Pinto, they didn't have a metric for safety, so they didn't measure the safety of the Ford Pinto, and so they had this massive recall. But if they would have created the metrics for that, they might have avoided a lot of money lost. So how do you break up a goal? You break it up into 3 parts. So there's a quantity goal, a quality goal, and the results. So for the quantity goal, maybe it's 3 new features is what you want to create. And then the quality aspect, you want to have fewer than 5 bugs per feature in quality assurance testing. And then finally, with the result, you want to make sure the developer writes a cleaner code. You want to make sure that the objectives are goal specific and time bound. And I think a lot of people get nervous when they set goals, but what's nice about these OKRs is that they're not set in stone. You can change them along the way as you progress. They had a cool quote by Steve Jobs, which was, innovation means saying no to 1,000 things. And how can you say no to 1,000 things? Well, one of the best ways is with OKRs, with these objectives. So if someone's trying to ask you to do something, you say, well, does that align with my OKR? No? Then sorry, I can't do that this quarter. Maybe when we redraft everything, we can come back to it and make that part of the next plan or the next set of the objectives. And on that same token, if you focus on everything, you focus on nothing. Because as many of the people listening, whether you're in a big organization or you're in a startup, there's a million things that seem like they need to be done all at once, but that's not really the case because there's only so many hours in the day, only so many resources, and only so much that you can do in a quarter. So being strategic, being thoughtful is essential. So some interesting stats. Public goals have a higher percentage of getting completed. Like I said, public accountability, everyone can see them. And this was a very staggering stat, was that only 7% of employees understand the business goals and how they play into them. And I don't think I jotted down the after the math stat, but it was something staggering, like up to like 90% people felt that they actually knew what they were trying to accomplish for the quarter when they had the OKRs, which I think a lot of people don't feel like some of the work that they're doing is contributing towards anything, and so having something to reflect back to is really nice. And this was the main example that got buy-in from everyone, which was John Doerr's fantasy football team example. So if you wanted to win the Super Bowl and fill the stadium, because not only winning is important, but making the money from concessions and ticket sales, food, etc., you got to break that down. And what was really cool is he broke down kind of, you need to have this offensive coordinator, you need to have this defensive coordinator, you need to have an uptick of marketing by 25%, really breaking those to tangible goals. I don't want to give away everything because it's good to go out and actually buy the book and read it, but that was the main example that got people on board. A cactus knows how to survive. It can endure scorching heat, limited rainfall, and defends itself against critters daily. Your business is no different. To survive harsh conditions, it's important to develop deep roots using media content that'll continuously nourish and support your marketing efforts day after day. Tactus Media is here to help you determine a strategy and create media content. Together, let's map out the next sequence of videos, podcasts, and social media to help your business thrive. Work with Tactus Media, media tactics that stick. Ouch! Visit tactusmedia.com to learn more. And just some of the benefits that stood out to me was that the higher the goal, the higher the performance. So a lot of the times when you're reaching for a bigger goal, it uncovers all these other things that you need to do in order to even achieve that goal. And sometimes in striving for something big, I think a lot of people have heard the quote, when you shoot for the stars, you might hit the moon. Well, that's exactly the case here. And what I found was really cool is that a lot of the teams started to feel comfortable reaching out to other departments because they say, oh, your department works into our OKR, we need to work together. Whereas I think sometimes in an organization, it's easy to get siloed or just focus on like, hey, what can we do? Because, we want to have our own success within our own department. So that way we look good and we get the bonuses, etc. All of those kind of, politics that go into play. They used a nice example of Myfitnesspal, which was just an app that was created by two brothers. They got acquired by Under Armour, and once they got acquired by Under Armour, OKRs were that much more necessary because then you're having an engineering team that's helping you, and if they don't have a North Star, then everything's kind of fall flat or just get stagnant. And they explained that it took them about 2 to 3 quarters to really get things dialed in. And they would either hit their goals or they would wildly miss. So they started assigning deadlines, and they had different metrics for measurements of success. Another pitfall that they found when you're aiming for these bigger goals, so the more ambitious the objective, the more conservative the KRs would be, the key results that people would go for, which is a pretty classic move because you want to hit it, so you got to maybe just do the easy things, but doing what is easy is only going to lend itself to pretty, basic results. Now, I feel like I'm kind of like a broken record. I'm explaining some of these over and over again, but, another success story is the Intuit story, which was they were trying to stay ahead of the curve with their initiatives. So, their co-founder explains that he's a pretty open person, and what he wanted to do was have the implementation of OKRs be something that wasn't a top-down, you have to do this, but something that was enthusiastic from the employees, coming up with the idea for where they want to go and really getting behind these objectives. And what's nice is they were able to attribute, so if any new projects get asked, they have to ask themselves, hey, does this align with the company's OKR for the year or for the quarter? And the Intuit success story is just another example of validation that OKRs are, create transparency from all levels of leadership in a company. And people are able to see what even headquarters is doing, because I think that sometimes gets lost, definitely geographically. Whatever tools different departments are using can create that separation. And they explain that employees thrive when they know how their goals tie into their managers, and then when they know that how their managers plays into the company's overall goals. And what's kind of funny, Intuit here is this very digital company today, but when they first implemented OKRs, everyone was using their own Microsoft Word file, and there's no collaboration within your own Microsoft Word file, so everyone was putting them into this intranet, but it is just hard for everyone to read and be able to assess all of the information at scale. So that's when finding software solutions today is a good way of going about it. But for them, is like putting them in a public spaces, so there's accountability and alignment between everyone. Okay, so now the scoring system of OKRs, which is what they do is It's very binary. Silicon Valley is 0 to 1. So 0.07 to 1 is considered a success. 0.04 to 0.06 would be kind of mid-grade. And they actually do a color coding system. So for that success, it's green. For that 0.4 to 0.06, that's yellow. And then 0.0 to 0.04 is a red. Failed or little to no progress was made. And a little interesting side note is that for Google, if they were close to accomplishing 100% of their goals, then they weren't pushing themselves hard enough. So they're really striving for that mid-grade. A 0.07 is good, which is just a different way of looking at it. I think a lot of us are used to grades in school where you got to really hit that grade. And what they explain with these OKRs, they're not a grade, they're more of a guide that's just giving you a benchmark and letting you know that you're going in the right direction of where you want to accomplish things. And the buckets that they use is, if you were to put this in a spreadsheet, is you have the OKR, you have progress, you have the score, and then you have the self-assessment. And at the end of all of that, the self-assessment part is, what did we learn from that experience? Did you accomplish all of your goals? Why or why not? What obstacles did you encounter? What did you learn that you can apply to the next goal? So really, at the end of the day, you're creating this big, hairy, audacious goal. They're calling it BHAG is what they are calling them. And with Google, creating this search engine that everyone can use, giving accessibility. That's a massive goal, but you got to really break it down. And they talk about, Jim Collins, Good to Great. You want to have a challenging goal. And one of those big challenging goals that we know of is NASA. They wanted to land on the moon in the 60s. And so they had to break that down into tangible goals. What tangible metrics need to happen to be able to reach that? And so they have two segments of these goals, which is committed goals, which we're definitely getting these done, and then you have your aspirational goals, things that are stretching you, that force you to think outside the box, that force you to really analyze what resources you have and see what you can get done. And what I found was really fascinating, so if Google wants to be 1,000 times better, that's thinking a lot bigger than just trying to make a 10% increase, which is where a lot of companies are at. We just want to increase a little bit at a time. But if you aim for the stars, you're gonna lose. If you swing for the fences, you're gonna lose, but you're also gonna win, because it's gonna make you have to rethink problems, and you're striving for that 70% success rate, which means you're gonna be losing 30%, which by these margins is success. One of the things I found fascinating was they explained that it takes a lot of courage to set some of these impossible goals, because everyone can see them. So you're setting this very lofty, hard goal, and if you fail, you have to go up and explain why you failed. So there is an amount of courage, an amount of accountability that goes into setting the right goals. One of the things that Google was trying to do was they were trying to scale to 1 billion users. That was their objective. And so getting people to use Google Chrome, they were just scratching their heads. This is a free web browser. How can we get people to jump on board? One of the solutions they had was they ran the successful television ad, Dear Sophie. I don't know if some of you remember seeing it, but this young girl, her dad is taking photos and video along her life from birth to those early stages when, a lot of us don't remember the 3 to 4 years when we were in our infancy. It was a really endearing advertisement. If you get the chance, just on YouTube, I'll see if I can put it into the show notes, but Dear Sophie campaign. And so they had some success at Google because of this, but they still had missed the mark. They failed in their first year to reach 50 million users. Again, they're trying to reach that 1 billion users. And so they aggressively set the next target for 111 million the following year. And how they were able to reach that, they had to think outside the box. Well, why don't we reach out to dormant users? And once they did that, they were able to get people back on board. But if they didn't have that lofty goal, they would have maybe never thought to reach out to the people that had used the service at one point but have dropped off and become dormant. Now I want to dive into the YouTube story, which starts with Susan Washajik. I don't think I said her name right, but she was aggressive in acquiring and seeing the vision of what YouTube could be. which was a disruptor of television. And Google already had their own video platform, but it was slow to upload, and they saw that YouTube was just totally outperforming them. So they acquired them for $1.65 billion. I remember when that happened. That was a big deal. And I think a lot of people had the idea of what it could be, and that's wound up, if you look at today, 2021, YouTube is a massive platform. But for them, it was kind of a tough transition because for Google, what they are constantly trying to do is send you where you want to go as quickly as possible. So they're in the business of helping you leave, whereas YouTube is in the business of how can we get you to stay and watch their platform a little bit longer. And they use a cool example of a bow tie video. So if you're on YouTube and you click on a bow tie video, viewers are actually happier. You have if you had two videos, you had one that's 2 minutes and you have one that's 10 minutes. You would think that, hey, maybe you just want to watch the 2 minute. It gets you what you want to watch. But people are actually happier watching 2 minutes of the 10-minute video than they are of watching all of that 1 minute or 2 minute video, which I thought was really interesting. That they now have like kind of this happiness metric that they're going for, is how can they provide a good experience, which at the end of the day, that's what we're all trying to do, is create a product that resonates and leaves the user walking away in a positive mood with something that they can reflect back on, maybe consciously or subconsciously, like, hey, I had a good experience with that brand. And so their big hairy goal was to get 1 billion hours of watch time daily. So getting people to hang out, spend time on the platform. And for Google, this was a 4-year goal. And they actually attribute to Christos Goodrow. And, he was concerned that they weren't going to reach this goal. And he actually said, hey, if we don't reach this goal, I'm going to resign. And so that kind of actually put a little bit more of a fire. And they explained how for them, they had to start thinking, okay, if we're going to make these changes, even like the little incremental changes are going to make a big difference. So if you can make a 0.02 increase, that was going to make a world of change if everyone and all the departments are working on that. So it took about 150 of these little 0.02 increments to finally reach that goal. And what I found fascinating is because they had the lofty goal, it unveiled some of these unanticipated things, such as redesigning the architecture, the storage. It really got everyone thinking much, much bigger than where they were at now. A cool quote that they threw in there is that, from Albert Einstein, is that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. So I think it's easy if you're in the kind of the metric mindset of just let's measure everything, but then you'll start measuring things that really aren't making a big difference. So really identifying what are the measurables that are going to make the biggest impact for you, which takes assessment, doing that post analysis and analyzing and seeing where you're at every quarter at the end of the year. So let's talk about kind of that restructuring, the culture changes within an organization. They have Jim Collins talk about where you want to get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and put everyone in the right seat, and then you can put your foot on the gas and go. And for them, that starts with some of these restructuring HR and payment structures. Because if a lot of people feel that they need to hit their metrics in order to get their raise, well, they're going to set lower goals for themselves. And so what they had to actually do is separate the goals from the pay structure, which I thought was a unique approach. It gives people a little bit more freedom to dream bigger, to stretch themselves beyond what they thought was capable. And also with that was, instead of these quarterly or annual progress reports or review, they have a notion of ongoing feedback, especially when you have these aggressive OKRs, having your manager telling you along the way, empowering you, explaining, guiding you through that process, not telling you top down what you should be doing, but giving you the tools and the guidance necessary to reach the goals that you're going for. And one of the nuggets that stood out to me was, instead of employee of the month, they should have achievement of the month celebrated instead, which totally makes sense. So rather than highlighting the person, you say, hey, this is what they did that was so special. And I can imagine if I was working within an organization, that would be pretty inspiring, and it actually give you the understanding of like, why are certain people getting promoted? Oh, it's because they set their sights on a goal, they achieved it, and it made an impact on the company. They use the example of Adobe. They have Adobe check-ins, so they're able to frequently talk with the different employees. It actually lowered the attrition rate, so people weren't leaving because they actually felt like they knew what was going on, and they were able to make the proper adjustments rather than waiting until the end of the year to make the final adjustment on where they should go with their project. And often they could say, hey, my KR is at risk, which is a better phrase of getting mad at the person, saying, oh, yeah, they're lazy or they're just like not working hard enough. You can say, hey, the KR, the key result that they're going for, is at risk. And when that happens, you're able to have something that you can fall back on, and you're able to bring the right people into place to help them with that key result. And one of the big things is just a lot of the employees walked away saying, I now know what my manager expects from me, which is, I think, a really good feeling when you know what you need to do, how to do it, and when you reach those goals, being compensated and rewarded appropriately. I found it very interesting. So I'm reading another marketing book, and they actually reference Bono, and they talk about Bono in this book as well, which his One campaign, which was their anti-apathy on a global scale, which they were really shooting for the stars, trying to alleviate AIDS in Africa. But through this, they were actually able to get $100 billion worth of relief money from Bill Gates. And Bono explains that they weren't the best band, but they had a vision. And the reason that they chose to go after AIDS was because they felt that, just by the coincidence that you were born in, this random place, that you're not going to get access to the pills that you need, just felt like really wrong. So kudos to them for shooting for the stars and really making an impact. I mean, this is a campaign that many people remember. But they talk about some of the setbacks that they had along the way. They were starting to get stretched too thin, and so they had John Doerr come in, and one of the things that he shed light on is that you should, if you're helping certain people, they should have a seat at the table. And that was a big thing that they realized was, they started having all their priorities get out of whack. So the people that are directly going to be impacted by what you're trying to accomplish, they should have a spot, and they should have a say in what you're trying to do. And ultimately, the litmus test for your OKRs is the person that has a seat at the table. Ask your customers, is this what they want? Are you meeting that need? And better yet, are you exceeding beyond what the expectations are for your product? So overall, my thoughts, the book summary was, I'm definitely going to be implementing OKRs into my own metrics, which I've started doing. Again, don't want to give away too much for some of my competitors out there, but some of those are, my own marketing efforts, how I'm going about my sales pipeline, and just making sure that I'm putting metrics to it, because I think, especially kind of in the creative agency, you can wait for the projects to come through. You can just cross your fingers and pray and hope that things are going to work out, but having something that you can reference, for me, I keep it in a Google sheet, and you're able to quantify what you want to get done for the quarter, what you want to get done each day. A big part of this is making sure that there's alignment between the things that you're doing daily, monthly, with your objective, your overall vision for the organization. And one of the other big things that stood out to me was, I was surprised, frankly, by how many companies have used OKRs in their strategy to find success. Intel, Google, Bono. It feels like a very common factor, and I'm personally very excited to try them, especially in 2021 with a new year. I'm a small team, so it's easy for me to adapt and implement, and get buy-in, because it's just me. But I'm excited. If you're a bigger organization, I think it does take a little bit of sometimes restructuring, sometimes a cultural change to make that possible. So overall, this book in a nutshell is about prioritizing the right things, having a North Star to fall back on, and you're able to manage very lofty goals. I think it's easy to set small goals, little things, but having a lofty goal that you're aiming for, how do you bring it back? What are the measurables that you're trying to seek after? What are those key results that you're trying to obtain? And ultimately finding that sweet spot. I was very blown away that success isn't, they use 0 and 1. Success isn't a 1. A success is 0.07. So that means that your goals are stretching you just enough, and makes you feel they're just a little bit outside of your reach, forcing you to innovate, push for more, and be successful. I hope this has been helpful for you. I'm very curious if you start implementing OKRs into your own business, your own life. Please let me know in some of the comments. And best of luck. If there's any other books you guys want me to review, definitely happy to check those out. I know this wasn't nearly as video marketing or marketing related, but I think in lieu of the new year and the new aspirations that we all have, setting the right goals and metrics are just setting yourself up for success, or maybe not being successful, so then you can reflect back and figure out where you can get to that 0.07 to finding that sweet spot of moving forward. So thank you guys. Until next time, that's the VidMark Podcast. Thanks for tuning in to VidMark, a place for all your video marketing needs. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform and tune in every Thursday morning on either iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and more. For a behind-the-scenes look and some bonus tips, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next time, good luck with your video marketing efforts, and remember, always hit the mark.